there, thanks for joining me for a walk in the Carpenter shop. As we walk along today, I'm Jeff Dixon, I'm going to be your host. And there are some times that we find ourselves in situations where we don't understand what's going on around us. The news is frightening, scary, it's not always good. And there are people that look to followers of Jesus, the body of Christ, and they get frustrated with us. Someone recently said this, I get so upset when people try to brush aside all the things, the bad things that are happening with that old platitude, all things work together for good. They went on to say, it seems a little cruel, especially when people are suffering and tragedy is taking place. That just doesn't cut it. Why do followers say that? Is that being helpful, or is it doing more damage than good? Now, what they're referring to is Romans 8:28. You're probably familiar with it. It says this, we know that everything in God's works for the good of those who love him. Now, that's the New Century Version, so it may be a little bit different than what you're familiar with. All things work together for good for those who serve him. I think it's one of the most helpful and comforting verses in the entire Bible because it talks about God's sovereignty in every situation of life. Good, bad, uptime, downtime. But as Paul writes it, he reminds us that God is at work. And there's a Greek word that he uses for this. It's synergo. And the word itself is the great-great-great-grandfather of the contemporary word that we use in our culture today called synergy. And Paul is saying that God can make all things synergo, or synergize for the good. In other words, he's saying that God is active and creative. He's blending the paprika with the parsley, the faith with the failings, the triumph with the tears, and the strides with the stumbles. And individually, all the ingredients don't look so hot. The circumstances before you mix them together aren't so good, but when it's done, they have appeal. Why? Well, the verse tells us God works for good. So in other words, God uses our struggles to build character. James makes the same point in his letter when he says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. And that's James 1, 2-4. In other words, today's trials lead to tomorrow's maturity. I'll say that again. Today's trials, whatever you're facing right now, is leading toward tomorrow's maturity. Hasn't the oyster taught us this principle? You take a grain of sand that invades the comfort of the shell, and how does the oyster respond? How does the oyster deal with the irritation? Does he go to the oyster bar for a few drinks? Does he get depressed and clam up? See what I did there? Oyster bar, clam up. Anyway, does he go on a shopping binge and shell out a bunch of money to get over the pain? No. He eventually emits a substance that not only overcomes the irritation, but it transforms the irritation and changes it into a pearl. Every pearl, when you break it down, is nothing more than a victory over irritation. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, we have to trust. We trust. We trust totally and completely and remember that God is working for the good, and he is using all things. Now, any verse can be misused. And to just throw it out without understanding what it means or not thinking about the meaning of it, well, that's kind of silly. But the reality of it is a powerful reminder and a promise from God that as frightening as the world can be, as out of control as it can be, and as scary as it can be, God is taking all of those things, the trials of today, for the maturity of tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in the Carpenter shop. I look forward to next time.